The wedding invitation had been sitting on my kitchen counter for weeks, a crisp white envelope with elegant gold lettering. I had ignored it for as long as I could, pretending that if I didn't acknowledge it, the event wouldn't happen. But here I was, dressed in a suit that felt too formal, standing outside a grand venue decorated with white roses and soft golden lights. Jake was my best friend, had been since college. We had met during freshman orientation, instantly clicking, despite our differences. He was the all-American straight guy, the one who always had a new girlfriend, while I was the quiet observer, the best friend who offered relationship advice, but never seemed to find someone myself. Now, he was getting married to Samantha, a woman I barely knew but who seemed perfect on paper. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, immediately feeling out of place. The atmosphere was thick with romance. Couples holding hands, soft music playing, the faint scent of fresh flowers lingering in the air. It wasn't that I didn't believe in love. I had once before my last relationship ended in a mess of broken promises and quiet disappointments. Now, weddings felt more like performances than celebrations. I had been invited as Jake's old college buddy, but the truth was, I was the only openly gay man in attendance, and I could already feel the unspoken questions lingering in the air. The venue was breathtaking. Towering chandeliers, elegant table settings, and a sprawling dance floor waiting to be filled with happy couples. Everything was perfect, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. I caught sight of Jake near the altar, adjusting his tie with shaking hands. He was nervous, which made sense. Weddings were a big deal, a lifelong commitment. But as I approached him, something about his expression struck me as off. Not just nerves, but something deeper. "Big day," I said, forcing a smile as I clapped him on the shoulder. Jake let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, feels surreal." I studied him carefully. We had known each other for years, long enough for me to recognize when something was wrong. His usual confidence was missing, replaced by something hesitant, almost reluctant. "Nervous?" I asked, watching him closely. "Of course, it's my wedding day," he said quickly, but his eyes darted away as he spoke. I wanted to press further, to ask if he was truly happy, but before I could, someone called his name, and just like that, the moment was gone. He smiled at me, tight-lipped, almost rehearsed, before walking off toward his bride-to-be. Something about it didn't sit right with me. The wedding rehearsal was in full swing, the atmosphere buzzing with excitement as the bridal party gathered in the decorated hall. The soft hum of laughter and conversation filled the space, but my attention was locked on Jake. He stood near the altar, his posture rigid, his hands gripping the edges of his suit jacket a little too tightly. His expression was pleasant, even cheerful, but something about it felt forced. Then, there was Samantha. She was stunning in a flowing ivory dress, her long dark hair styled in soft waves. Every movement she made was effortless, graceful. When she turned to greet me, her smile was warm. But there was something about her that felt slightly distant, like she was present, but not fully engaged. "So you're Jake's best friend," she said, her voice smooth and even. "Since college," I confirmed, shaking her hand. She nodded, giving Jake a sideways glance. "He's told me a lot about you." I studied her expression, trying to read between the lines. Was there something behind that smile? A flicker of curiosity? Doubt? It was hard to tell. She and Jake seemed like the perfect couple, at least on the surface. The rehearsal carried on, everyone following the motions of what would happen the next day. I watched as Jake and Samantha stood side by side, repeating their lines for the ceremony. His voice was steady, but I caught the slight hesitation before he spoke, a fraction of a second too long, a pause that only someone who knew him well would notice. "Man, can you believe it?" a voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see the best man, Jason, a guy I had met a few times over the years. He was a loud, confident type, the kind of guy who dominated every conversation. "What?" I asked. "Jake," settling down. Jason chuckled, shaking his head. "If you knew him back in the day, you'd get why it's so crazy." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Jason smirked. "I don't know, man. He was just different before. Thought he'd never commit to anyone, you know? Like he was always waiting for something. Or someone. The way he said it sent a ripple of unease through me. I wanted to ask more, but Jason had already turned his attention elsewhere, clapping another groomsman on the back. Later, as the bridal party wrapped up rehearsal and guests started to drift off to the reception dinner, I found myself seated beside Samantha's maid of honor, Olivia. She was friendly, chatty, the kind of person who made you feel like you had known her forever. "I think it's so sweet that you and Jake are still close," she said, sipping her wine. "Yeah," I replied slowly. "We've been through a lot," she nodded, glancing at Jake and Samantha across the room. "I think that's why I was surprised they worked things out." My stomach tightened. "Worked things out?" Olivia hesitated, as if she had said too much. "They had a little break a while ago. It wasn't long, but Jake was a mess during that time." I kept my expression neutral. "What happened?" She gave me a knowing look. "No one really talks about it. But whatever it was, Samantha forgave him, and they moved past it." I turned my gaze back to Jake. He was laughing at something Samantha had said, his arm wrapped around her waist, but that tension still lingered. In his expression, something wasn't right, and I was going to figure out what it was. Jake stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for what had to be the 10th time. His hands were steady, but his face told a different story. His jaw was tight, his eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. "Relax," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "You look fine. More than fine. You look like a guy about to make a lifelong commitment in front of 100 people and a slightly terrifying priest." He let out a half-hearted chuckle, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's comforting." I walked over, fixing the knot of his tie just to give him something else to focus on. "Seriously, you got this. If anyone should be nervous, it's Samantha. She's marrying you, after all." That earned a small smile, but the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. I wanted to brush it off as typical wedding day nerves, but after last night's odd conversations, the doubt had already started to fester in my mind. Jake exhaled slowly. "Can I ask you something?" I raised a brow. "Of course. Do you think love is a choice, or destiny?" The question caught me off guard. I expected him to ask about cufflinks or whether his vows sounded good. Not something so existential. Hesitated. "That's a loaded question." He gave me a look, waiting. I sighed, considering my words. "I think love is a little of both. You meet people by chance, maybe even feel something right away. But choosing to love them? That takes effort, work." Jake stared at me for a long moment, like he was weighing my answer, trying to fit it into something bigger. "I used to think it was just destiny," he said softly. "That you meet someone and it just makes sense." I swallowed. Something about the way he said it sent a shiver through me. There was something deeper here, something unsaid. But before I could respond, someone knocked on the door, breaking whatever moment had been forming between us. The best man's voice called out, reminding Jake that it was almost time. Jake blinked, like shaking off a thought, and squared his shoulders. "Guess it's showtime." I nodded, but the strange weight of his words lingered in my chest. The ceremony was as beautiful as expected. The guests sat in rows of white chairs, the sun casting a golden glow over the outdoor venue. Flowers lined the aisle, soft music playing as everyone whispered excitedly. I watched from my seat near the front, a perfect view of everything. Samantha walked down the aisle, stunning in her gown, her face glowing with happiness. Jake stood at the altar, waiting for her, smiling in a way that almost convinced me. Almost. But I saw it. The slight shift in his stance, the way his fingers twitched at his sides, the hesitation before he took her hands in his. He was nervous, and not in the way a man about to marry the love of his life should be. The officiant began speaking, the usual words about love and commitment, about how this was a union meant to last forever. Samantha said her vows first, her voice steady, filled with adoration. Then it was Jake's turn. For a moment, I thought he was fine. He took a breath, started speaking. But then, just for a second, he faltered. A tiny pause. Barely noticeable to anyone else, but to me, it was a crack in the performance. He recovered quickly, saying the rest without issue, slipping the ring onto Samantha's finger. The crowd clapped, the tension passed, and the ceremony continued. But something inside me felt heavier, because in that brief hesitation, in that tiny fleeting moment, I saw something in Jake's eyes, something that looked a lot like doubt. The reception was in full swing, laughter and clinking glasses filling the grand hall. Couples swayed on, the dance floor, hands entwined, faces glowing with that giddy head-over-heels kind of love. It was the kind of scene that once would have made me hopeful, even happy. But tonight, it felt suffocating. I sat at my table, nursing a drink I barely tasted, watching as Jake and Samantha shared their first dance as husband and wife. He smiled at her, his hands resting on her waist, moving in sync to the slow, romantic melody. From the outside, they were the perfect couple, a picture of happiness. But all I could think about was the look in his eyes during the ceremony, the hesitation that no one else seemed to notice. "Hey, you look like you need a distraction." A voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see one of the bridesmaids, a tall, striking woman with dark curls and an easy smile. She extended a hand. "Dance with me?" I hesitated for a second before taking her hand. Why not? If I was going to be stuck here, I might as well play along. We spun onto the dance floor, the music shifting into something livelier. She was good, confident, effortless. I matched her steps, laughing as she twirled unexpectedly. It was fun, but that's all it was. No spark, no pull. Just movement. Just a distraction from the nagging feeling in my gut. After a few songs, I stepped away, heading toward the bar for another drink. That's when I heard it. You know. Jake had a love before Samantha. The voice was slurred, low, but it cut through the noise around me. I turned to find an older man, clearly drunk, leaning heavily against the bar. His tie was loose, his face flushed with alcohol. He squinted at me, like he wasn't sure if he should be saying more. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady, but my heart was already racing. The man smirked, shaking his head. "Ah, forget it. No one talks about that." He took another sip of his drink before muttering, almost to himself, "Wasn't even a woman." The world tilted for a second. I felt like the floor beneath me had just vanished, my breath catching in my throat. Had I misheard him? Jake? With a man? Before I could ask anything else, the older man laughed, shaking his head like he had said too much. Then he stumbled away, blending into the crowd. I stood frozen, my mind racing. I had known Jake for years, through college, through relationships, through everything. But not once, had he ever hinted at being anything other than straight. And yet, that hesitation at the altar, that question this morning about love being a choice, that tight, unreadable look in his eyes, it all clicked into place, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was trying to solve. I needed answers. I scanned the room, my gaze shifting between guests, picking out the ones who had known Jake the longest. If there was a truth buried in this night, I was going to find it. I sat at the edge of the reception hall, nursing another drink, still reeling from what the older man had let slip. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all blurred into the background as I focused on one thing. I needed to know the truth. I spotted a group of Jake's college friends near the dance floor, caught up in conversation, drinks in hand. If anyone knew about his past, it was them. I approached casually, feigning the ease I didn't feel. "So tell me, what was Jake like back in college? He ever do anything wild?" The group laughed. One of them, a guy with a crooked smile and an easy demeanor, leaning in. "Jake? Oh man. He was the chillest guy, always up for anything, but never the one causing trouble." Another chimed in, a woman with sharp eyes and a knowing smirk. "Except for that one time." The first guy chuckled. "Oh right, the Ethan phase." I froze. I forced myself to sound casual. "Ethan? Oh, just this guy Jake was always with," the woman said, waving her hand like it was nothing. "They were inseparable." Another friend nodded. Yeah, like inseparable. Always together, always whispering, always sneaking off somewhere. No one really knew what was going on, but one day, poof, Ethan was just gone. I swallowed hard. Gone? What happened to him? The group exchanged glances before the woman shrugged. No one really knows. One day he was just out of the picture. Jake never talked about it. That unease in my gut grew stronger. A name that had never come up in all my years of knowing Jake. Yet, here he was, at the center of a story that felt too significant to be meaningless. I thanked them and slipped away, the name Ethan looping in my head. Was Jake in love with him? Had they been more than just friends? And if so, why had Ethan disappeared so suddenly? I needed answers. I found Jake outside, standing alone near the edge of the venue where the lanterns cast a soft glow against the night. He looked lost in thought, a drink in his hand, untouched. I hesitated for a second before stepping forward. Hey. He turned, startled, but relaxed when he saw me. Hey. Escaping the madness too? I studied him, unsure how to approach it. Something like that. Silence stretched between us, the distant hum of the reception filling the background. Finally, I took a breath. Who's Ethan? Jake stiffened. His fingers clenched around the glass, his whole body going still. I didn't let up. People keep mentioning him. They say you two were close. Then one day he was just gone. Jake's jaw tightened. It's not. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. It's complicated. I stepped closer. Try me. He hesitated, his gaze locked on the horizon like he was searching for a way out. Then finally, his voice dropped to a whisper. He left. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. Why? Jake's eyes flickered to mine, something raw and unguarded flashing through them before he looked away. Because I let him go. The words hung between us, heavy and unfinished. I could hear the weight in them, the pain he wasn't saying, and in that moment, I knew. Ethan hadn't just been a friend. Jake had loved him, and for some reason, he had walked away. I couldn't let it go. Jake's words haunted me. He left. I had to let him go. That wasn't an answer. That was a wound, still open, still bleeding beneath the surface of his carefully composed life. And if I had come this far, I wasn't going to stop now. The night buzzed around me, full of dancing and celebration, but I barely heard any of it. I moved through the reception like a man on a mission, scanning the faces, listening in on conversations, looking for any piece of the puzzle I hadn't yet found. Then, I heard it. Two guests murmuring near the bar, voices hushed but not hushed. Enough! I thought he wasn't coming, one of them said. He wasn't supposed to, the other replied, casting a quick glance toward the far side of the room. But there he is. I don't know how he even got in. My stomach flipped. I followed their gaze, my eyes sweeping over the crowd, until I saw him. A man stood near the back of the venue, half hidden in the shadows, his expression unreadable, but his eyes locked onto Jake. He looked like he was barely breathing, like every fiber of his being was being pulled toward the groom. And yet, he stayed frozen in place, as if stepping any closer might break him entirely. I knew, before I even spoke to him, who he was. Ethan. I made my way toward him, carefully, like I was approaching something fragile. He didn't notice me until I was right in front of him. And when he did, his eyes darted away, as if he had been caught somewhere he didn't belong. You're Ethan, I said. Not a question. He exhaled shakily, his fingers tightening around, the empty glass in his hand. Who's asking? I'm a friend of Jake's. That made him laugh, but there was no humor in it. Then you should know this isn't my place. I studied him, the way his shoulders curled in, the way his lips pressed together like he was holding back words he wanted to spill. Then why are you here? I asked softly. His throat worked as he swallowed. Then, finally, he whispered. I had to see him, one last time. The pain in his voice hit me like a punch to the chest. I didn't know him, but I knew that kind of love. The kind that didn't fade, no matter how much time had passed. The kind that lingered, like a scar that never fully healed. Tell me what happened, I said. He looked away, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. It matters to Jake, I pressed. It matters to you. Ethan hesitated, but something in my voice must have reached him because finally he sighed. We were in love, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Jake wanted to come out. He wanted to have a real life with me. But his family, his father, made sure he knew that wasn't an option. I clenched my jaw. He tried to fight it. But in the end, he chose them, Ethan said, his voice breaking just slightly. And I couldn't be the reason he lost everything. So I left. I felt the weight of his words sink into my chest. Jake hadn't just lost a lover. He had been forced to give up the life he wanted. And now, here he was, married to a woman. While the man he had once loved stood just feet away, still carrying the heartbreak neither of them had ever moved on from. I found Jake near the edge of the venue, where the noise of the wedding was just a distant hum. He stood rigid, his hands clenched into fists, his shoulders rising and falling with every sharp breath. I didn't give him a chance to escape. We need to talk. My voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Jake turned to me, his expression guarded. Not now. Yes, now. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Ethan is here, Jake. His entire body went still. I watched his throat work as he swallowed, but he didn't say anything. He never stopped loving you, I continued, pushing forward. And you? I exhaled sharply. Jake, tell me the truth. Do you still love him? His breath came out shaky, and for a second, I thought he might deny it. But then, his face crumpled. His hands came up to his face as he let out a broken laugh. God, I've tried so hard not to. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. I thought if I did everything right, if I listened to my family, if I married a good woman, if I built the life they wanted for me, then maybe it would get easier. His voice cracked. But it hasn't. It never has. I let the silence settle between us, letting him breathe, letting him feel. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes desperate. What do I do? I held his gaze. You already know. His jaw clenched. It's not that simple. No, I agreed. It's not. But love isn't about doing what's expected. It's about doing what's true. Jake sucked in a breath, his eyes flickering with something I hadn't seen before. A spark. A possibility. A choice. For the first time that night, I saw him start to believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to live a lie anymore. Jake took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. His hands still trembled, his heart pounded against his ribs. But something inside him had shifted. He turned back toward the reception, where the music played and the guests laughed, oblivious to the storm raging inside him. He knew what he had to do. As he stepped into the ballroom, his eyes immediately found Ethan. Ethan stood near the exit, as if he were ready to disappear at any moment. But when their gazes locked, he froze. Jake didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward him, past the dancing couples, past the smiling guests, past everything that was supposed to be his perfect wedding night. He stopped right in front of Ethan, his breath unsteady. I can't do this. Ethan's brows furrowed. Jake. Before he could say another word, a presence moved beside them. Samantha. Her face was calm. Too calm. Her eyes searched Jake's, and in that moment, she saw everything. She had always known. She had known in the way he kissed her, in the way he hesitated, in the way his heart never fully belonged to her. A quiet understanding passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. Jake's throat tightened. I'm sorry, he whispered. Samantha exhaled softly, her lips pressing together in a small, sad smile. I deserve someone who loves me completely. She reached for his hands, gave them a final squeeze, and then let go. Jake turned back to Ethan. For a brief second, there was hesitation. One last moment where fear threatened to hold him back. But then Ethan's fingers brushed his, and just like that, everything fell into place. Jake grasped Ethan's hand, holding on to him like he never wanted to let go. And together, they walked out of the wedding, stepping into a future that, for the first time in years, finally felt real. As I stood there, watching Jake and Ethan disappear into the night, I felt a strange knot in my chest. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It wasn't jealousy either. It was something deeper, something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time: hope. I had walked into this wedding thinking love was a cruel joke, that it was something fragile, something people lost more often than they found. I had convinced myself that romance, the kind that lasted, wasn't real. At least, not for people like me. But then I had watched Jake, a man who had spent years running from his truth, finally turn around and embrace it. I had seen Ethan, who had once given up everything for the person he loved, finally get that love back. I had witnessed love win. I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck as the reception carried on around me. The music played, people danced, and, somewhere across the room, Samantha was surrounded by her friends, already holding herself together with the quiet strength of someone who had always known this moment would come. Life moved forward. And so would I. Maybe my own love story wasn't over. Maybe, just maybe, the universe still had something in store for me. I smiled to myself, finishing the last sip of my drink. For the first time in a long time, I was willing to believe in the possibility of love again.